Okay, you've got your two pieces of fabric. You want to have them right sides together before you cut them out because you need two opposite pieces. Okay, I'm going to put the pattern down, pin it and cut around it. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the batting, pin it and cut around it. So I've got my pieces cut out, my piece of batting and my two outside and inside fabrics. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my batting and I'm going to put my wrong side up, put my batting on top of that wrong side of fabric, and then I am going to simply pin that in a couple of places. Okay. And I need to add one more pin there, and then I will take this over to the machine and baste it. Okay, so after you have pinned your batting onto the wrong side of the fabric, so I've got it pinned on the wrong side of the fabric, you're going to baste this batting to your fabric to keep it on there until you get the other piece together. So basically basting is just using a large stitch on your sewing machine. So you're going to change the stitch length with your stitch length dial, and I'm going to turn this to a 5. Okay, if you forget to do that, it's fine. It's just going to take you a little longer to actually get that on there. If you have to pick the stitches out, then that's going to take a little longer too. Okay, so when you baste your batting onto your fabric, you want to make sure that you're kind of doing it on as close to the edge as possible, because especially when you're sewing this cozy, it's going to be using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I do want to get my basting as close to the edge as possible. Okay, again, it's just going to be the big stitch. You do not have to back stitch when you're basting. In fact, it's a good idea not to. Okay, so I'm just as close to the edge as possible. Okay, so I'm just going to sew all the way around the outside edge of this. I'm using blue simply so you can see it here on the video. Okay, so I'm going all the way around. This is just simply to keep this piece on your fabric until you get this all together. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way around, doing the turn and pivot. Okay, so I've got that all done. Now when you are done basting something, you do want to go ahead and put your stitch length back to your normal stitch length. So in my case, it is a 2.5 because my stitch length goes all the way up to 5. So it's the halfway mark between the stitch lengths. Okay, the next step, you're going to need your little hair tie for. And we're going to have to actually do a little bit of hand sewing. Painless, I don't even have that much of a piece of thread here. But basically it's to keep it together so you can get it into your cozy. So if you kind of put it in a little oval like that, and you pinch one end, I'm probably, just a little bit, so it looks kind of like an 8, but the top part of the 8's not very big. So I pinched it. I'm actually going to kind of hand sew it together. You don't have to do it very much. It's going to be a little tricky because the elastic is going to fight the needle. That is what happens on the machines as well when you're using elastic. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of stitch this together. You might have little knotting issues with your thread. Does not have to be pretty. It's not going to show. It's going to be on the inside of your cozy. So I'm actually, even if you just like go one stitch and then wrap it around a little bit, that might be a better way to do that. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and make a knot so it stays. So I made one stitch, I went around it, and then I knotted it. Okay, so the end result, you can't really pin this stuff. So the end result is basically I just kind of stitch that together until I get it into my coffee cozy. Okay, so it looks kind of like that. You got a little bit pinched. Okay, I didn't really have a measurement for that. It's just kind of a eyeballing it thing. Okay, so on my fabric that doesn't have the batting attached to it, I'm just going to come make a little mark because you're going to want to leave, a side of this open when you're turning it inside out. So I'm actually going to make a little mark about 1 inch from each end, each short end on just one of my sides. Just to remind me that's where I'm going to stop and start. Okay, so much like your pin cushion when you turned it. Okay, I'm going to flip this part of my Coffee Cozy up. Now the wider side is actually your top of your Coffee Cozy, and the narrower side is the bottom. Okay, so I'm just going to flip it like that just to help me remember what I'm doing. Okay, I'm going to have my elastic. I'm going to actually put it right in the center of one side. Just kind of put it there. Okay, I have kind of where I stitched that, I kind of have it hanging over the edge there. So I'm going to lay that down like that. I'm going to take my other part of my Coffee Cozy, my fabric, and lay it on top with the right sides facing each other, as we always do. Okay, I'm kind of holding on to this little elastic thing, still holding it in there because I'm going to pin it down now so it stays while I pin the rest of this down. Okay, so I'm pinning it there, and I'm going to go ahead and pin it here just for now. Okay, so I'm going to pin all the way around here to hold it while I sew it. I do have a little bit of the batting hanging off here. I can trim that. I probably will. It's just easier to line up things when that happens. So I'm going to keep on pinning this, and then I will come back and show you how to sew this all together. Okay, so now I'm going to sew these two together. I have my marked side here and here, and that's where I'm going to start. Okay, I'm going to start at that first marked side. Okay, you're going to use a 1/4 seam allowance, which is the outside edge of your presser foot. Okay, make sure you put your stitch length back down to a 2 or 2.5. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. Go forward a few stitches, go backwards, make sure you're back stitching. Okay, when you get to that corner, it's not going to take you very long to get to that corner. Leave your needle down so you can rotate. Go take that pin out and continue on. Now when I get to the part where I'm over the elastic, pay special close attention there. Okay, so I'm already close to that point. When I get to the end here, I'm going to do the pivot thing again. Okay, I'm going to go and take that pin out. Okay, so here I am on the side with the hair tie, the elastic. I'm going to go over it once. I'm actually going to do a back stitch over it and then do a forward stitch again. Okay, that's just to make sure it's extra secure in there. Then I will go ahead and get to my other pivoting point there and continue on that long side. Okay. Whoops. Leave my needle down and just finish up. Go to that mark there. Get to that mark and then back stitch. Okay, you always want to make sure that you back stitch, especially when you have a turning point, because when I turn this, it's likely to break the stitches if you did not do a back stitch. Okay, so after you have that sewn, before you flip this right side out, you're going to want to clip your corners. That's simply the same thing we did with the pin cushion. I'm going to clip off that edge there. Make sure you don't trim off your stitches by mistake. Okay, trim off that corner. That's just to reduce the bulk. Trim off that corner. And I'm going to trim off that corner. Okay, when you have a curved edge, one thing you want to do is do some small little snips. Make sure you don't cut your stitches again. Okay, this helps when you turn it right side out. It helps that curve be a real curve. Kind of stretches out the fabric. And we'll be learning more about that a little later. I just cut my stitch, so I'll have to fix that. Okay, and just continue doing that on a curve. And then when I come back, I'm going to turn this right side out and press it. Okay, so I did turn this. I poked my corners out. I also tucked in my seam allowances right there. Go ahead and tuck them in. I'm going to press this. Now when you press something like this, press a little bit, you're going to want to make sure that you get these edges out. So sometimes you kind of have to roll them, flatten them a little bit, and give it a little steam. So again, I'm just kind of taking them between my fingers, mashing them back and forth. Okay. Doing the same thing to all sides of this. It's to make it nice and flat. Okay, the batting that's in there isn't to make it puffy. It's to give it, help your fingers not burn from your coffee. Or if you don't like your hands to get cold, you can certainly use this for a cold drink too. Okay, so it went all the way around. Give it a good press. I'll do it on the back side too. And now it's ready for the top stitch. Okay, so next I'm going to do the top stitch on this. So the top stitch, don't forget, is going to be where you line the outside edge of your presser foot to the edge of your fabric. I'm going to start up here. Actually, I'm going to start on the side and go all the way around. You don't want a back stitch because that's just going to cause a little extra, thread bunching there you don't need. Okay, so I'm going to go forward a little bit. I'm going to keep mine on a 2.5. If you want to move it up to a 3 to make your stitch a little bigger, it's really your choice. So I've got my fabric down. When you get to the corners, just like we've always done, pivot, and you'll keep going around. So you can do this all the way around. That's going to close up that hole that you use for turning. Okay, also it'll help secure that elastic one more time. Okay, so I'm just going to go all the way around. Whoops. Okay, so there are several projects that you might do that have this kind of stitching, the top stitching. Okay, and I just left my thread blue because I kind of like the way it looked. Okay, when you stop, you kind of go over where you started. So I started like back here and I kind of just overlapped my stitches a little bit. So at that point, you're done with the top stitching and we're going to be ready for the button. Okay, last thing you're going to do is put your button on. This one already has the button on. You want to have your button opposite of where your elastic is on the same side that is the right side. What I did is from the very edge, I measured 2 inches. Okay, so from here to right where my button begins is 2 inches, and then I put the button on that side, the 2 inches. It just depends on how big your button is. So you sew it on as you usually sew on a button, and then you are finished with your coffee cozy. It'll go around your cup, and you just button it up, and you are done.